Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie Smith, and I am your president. And on behalf of the Board of Directors for IREM San Antonio, I want to welcome and thank you all for joining us for our June virtual luncheon. Today, we'll be hearing from Scott Retzloff with Ryan about taxes and COVID-19, our two favorite topics. Before we begin today, I want to explain how we will be using the Zoom webinar platform. All attendees are on mute in order to preserve the sound quality of the recording. Please post all questions in the Q&A box. If you don't see the Q&A box on your screen, hover your mouse over the center of the screen. A toolbar will pop up at the top or bottom of the window where you can click on the Q&A button. Please don't use the chat box to ask questions, as they may get lost in the stream of wonderful positive comments from everybody today. You may ask questions in the Q&A box at any time during the presentation, and we'll review the questions at the end and ask as many as we can while being respectful of everybody's time. And if you get disconnected for some reason, please return to the link and click it again to jump back on. If you want to check back later to review the content, this webinar will be made available on our website at iremsanantonio.org under the Events tab and labeled Webinar Series. And that's also where you can find our program from last month as well. And now for a brief video from our Welcome Committee Chair, John.
Hello everyone, it's John Gargata with the Welcome and Registration Committee. Thanks for joining us today for our June lunch meeting. I know this is a little bit unusual, an unusual introduction, but during these times we adapt and do the best we can do. I hope to see everybody soon. Don't get my short.
What? Stop is
What happened?
a low.
Hello everyone, it's John Gargata.
Thank you, John, for putting that video together to give us a little humor and help us feel welcomed. It is good to laugh. And now Sally Flanagan will lead the pledge and invocation.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be with you, even virtually. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And bow your heads for this brief message. Loving and gracious God, as a blessing today, hear these words from Maya Angelou. Love recognizes no barriers. It jumps hurdles, leaps fences, and penetrates walls to arrive at its destination, full of hope. Amen.
Thank you, Sally. And now for our first virtual ACOM and CPM induction ceremony of Lisette Badillo, Assistant Property Manager with Lincoln Harris CSG, and Jane Ellen Davis, Senior Property Manager with Core Realty Holdings Management, Inc.
Good afternoon. My name is Jill Wellborn, and I am the Admissions Committee Chair. It is a privilege and an honor to be a part of this momentous occasion. This installation ceremony marks not only a significant achievement by each of our newest credentialed members, but it also marks the gateway to a whole new level of professional potential for them, their firms, and their clients. On behalf of the individuals being installed today, I would like to thank their families, friends, colleagues, and employers who have supported and championed them on this professional journey. As forward thinkers who want to make a difference through professional and ethical business practices, these individuals will help keep IREM as the world's leading real estate management association. Today, we are growing and strengthening the IREM community. When one member of IREM succeeds, we all share in that achievement. It is my pleasure to recognize these outstanding colleagues who have demonstrated much dedication and hard work by earning an IREM certification and are now ready to transform their professional knowledge and ethical standards into exceptional value for their companies, properties, and clients. Today, we welcome Jane Ellen Davis with Core Realty Holdings Management Incorporated, Certified Property Manager, and Lisette Badillo with Lincoln Harris CSG, Certified Property Manager and Accredited Commercial Manager. Before we install you, we would like to briefly hear from you one piece of advice that you would give someone who is on their CPM ACOM journey right now. Go ahead, Jane Ellen, would you share it with us?
I would tell anyone who's trying to get their CPM to never give up and keep strong in your goals and aspirations.
That's awesome. Thank you. Lisette?
I would just tell future members to don't let the financial burden stop you. There's scholarship and there's also online classes. So when there's a will, there's a way.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing your words of wisdom. And now, Natalie Smith, our IREM San Antonio president, will proceed with the induction.
Jill. Along with the prestige and benefits that come with your IREM credential also comes important responsibilities. The IREM Code of Professional Ethics establishes and maintains public confidence in the honesty, integrity, professionalism, and ability of all IREM members. By agreeing to adhere to the IREM Code of Professional Ethics, you pledge to advance the professional real estate management industry, to maintain the highest moral and ethical standards, to preserve and encourage fair and equitable practices and competition among all who are engaged in our profession, to place honesty, integrity, and industriousness above all else, to pursue ongoing education, to comply with the principles and declarations of IREM, and to acknowledge the ethical principles as set forth in the international ethics standards established by the International Ethics Standards Coalition, of which this institute is a member. I ask you to acknowledge these responsibilities by raising your right hand. Do you pledge today to uphold the IREM Code of Professional Ethics?
I do.
I do.
Ladies and gentlemen of IREM, please congratulate our newest CPM, Jane Ellen Davis, and our newest ACOM and CPM, Lisette Badillo. Congratulations. All right. Well, I hope you all were inspired by them. I know I was. And please, if you can, reach out to Lisette and Jane Ellen, send them a text, an email, a message, a comment, and let them know how excited you are for them in their journey. Thank you to Jill Wilborn and her team for putting together that video for us. Today we have a special COVID-19 industry update, which we think will be helpful to our members as janitorial has truly evolved over the last few months. So Scott O'Brien with PGS is going to provide us with a few takeaways. Take it away, Scott.
Thank you very much, Natalie. You know, when this pandemic hit, like a lot of you, PJS was really interested in three major concerns. One, safety for our customers and employees. Two, follow the mandates and the CDC guidelines and all of that. And then three, serve our customers in an effective manner. I'm going to focus mostly on the service part of it in the interest of time. There's really two major things that happen in the cleaning industry. One would be an emergency and one would be kind of the ongoing cleaning services in the COVID-19 era. You know, the emergency is somebody tests positive for COVID-19. We get a call from one of you all, our customers, and says, hey, we've got a problem. We went out, when this whole thing started, we went out and bought a lot of electrostatic cleaning, electrostatic disinfecting machines. And I want to take a moment to talk about the difference between disinfecting and sanitizing. So disinfecting is what kills, you know, all the viruses and and germs and bacteria on a surface. The challenge with disinfecting is it requires what they call a kill time. And the kill time is how long that surface stays wet. And kill time for most disinfectants is between 4 and 10 minutes. And so you can imagine we don't go through a building keeping all the surfaces wet for 10 minutes. We can, but it's not typically the process. So when it's less than that, it's called sanitizing. And sanitizing kills and removes a lot of the germs, bacteria, viruses. So when you're talking to your tenants, I encourage you to differentiate between the two. And when in doubt, talk about sanitizing. So, but when we use one of these electrostatic machines, it disinfects. And the guy looks like Ghostbusters. He goes through and, or the gal, and they spray this thing, and the disinfectant is electrically charged, and so it clings to the surfaces. It's a fantastic service. The other thing that we do is our ongoing, daily service. And what we've started doing is, first of all, we want to be very, very sure that we minimize the potential for our workers to get COVID-19, and certainly for any of our employees to spread COVID-19. So when they get to work, they get their temperature taken, and then through our facial recognition software for our timekeeping system, they have to answer the questions that we all answer. Or do you feel poorly? Do you have fever? Have you been around anybody with COVID-19? And when they do those things, then they can check in. We have created a new position on our team called a sanitizing specialist. And this person goes around, it's kind of like a specialized day porter. They're there during the day. They are very, very visible, which makes your tenants, feel like we're doing everything we can, or your tenants realize we're doing everything we can for them to be working in a safe environment. And they go around and they clean all the high touch points, the doors, the lobbies, the elevator buttons. If you have a directory that's a touch screen directory, those types of things. And then in the evenings, it's going to be interesting. And this is an ongoing discussion on what is cleaning going to look like? How is it going to be different? And that's going to depend a lot on you guys. What is it that you want? Most people want their spaces disinfected every night. Well, most people don't want to pay for their spaces to be disinfected every night. We think that again, the high touch points is what's going to be important. How long we're going to continue to do this, the increased sanitizing and all the things that we're doing is really going to depend on you, the tenants. We think it's going to be a part of the normal cleaning procedures for a while. It could be seasonal. It may be something that we get that ramps up when we see a spike in cases and then settles back down when cases are lower. You got to understand that this is a very labor intensive and equipment intensive service. So at the end of the day, we're going to put it on the scale that we always put it on: cost versus benefit. What are we paying and what are we getting for it? I know this was kind of quick. If you have any questions, if you want further information, my information is in the IREM directory, or you can simply email me at sobrien@pjs.com, sobrien@pjs.com. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you, Scott. I still learned something, even though I feel like I've tried to study it all. All right, so up next, I'm really excited. We're gonna hear from our Legislative Committee Chair, Brooke Kasper-Kahn, and our Legislative Committee Vice Chair, Ann Forage, about their experience at the Capitol Hill Fly-In.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So for those of you that have not heard about the Capitol Hill Fly-In, we're excited to share our experience this year. IREM headquarters offers IREM members an opportunity to meet with the federal legislators and advocate for issues of importance to the real estate management industry. On March 10th through 11th, Anne had the opportunity to join over 50 members that attended and conducted over 100 meetings with legislators to discuss the importance of reauthorizing and reforming the National Flood Insurance Program and supporting the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act. With that being said, we wanted to provide you more information on both topic and share IREM's advocacy. Next slide, please. Thank you. So IREM supports reform of the National Flood Insurance Program to ensure its ongoing sustainability, encouragement of cost-effective private flood insurance options, and long-term reauthorization of NFIP so that it remains a viable option for property owners. Next slide. If the NFIP Reauthorization Act were approved, the bill would extend the program for 5 years, including significant reforms to mapping and mitigation, and provide private flood insurance options. Next, please. So while Anne was in DC, she had the opportunity to meet with a representative of Senator John Cornyn and discuss the following. If the program expires, flood insurance will not be available through the NFIP, which provides over 90% of flood insurance nationwide and close to 100% of flood insurance coverage for individually owned properties and small to mid-sized commercial properties. IREM is advocating for legislation that includes a long-term NFIP reauthorization, encourages growth in the private flood insurance market, and includes reforms such as allowing commercial properties to opt out to make the program more sustainable. So that's my spill on the National Flood Insurance Program, and Anne will take the floor and share information on the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to talk about the second topic, which was the Safe Banking Act. So first, some facts. Medical and or recreational cannabis is legal in 33 states, but it is still illegal at the federal level, while IREM does not take a position on the legalization of marijuana. This inconsistency between state and federal law is causing problems for the companies that operate in this business and for landlords that might have this type of business as tenants in their buildings. So because our banking system is nationwide and crosses state lines, cannabis business can't use banks for deposits or credit card transactions. This means they're operating cash, and well, operating in cash and not having normal operating deposit can lead to problems for those cash businesses, such as theft, tax fraud, and money laundering. Next slide, please. So this topic was a little harder to present to the senator representative since Texas is, since the cannabis is not legal in Texas, but we try to present this as a problem for the landlords. And while I was in DC, I met with Denny Meadow, so he's a fellow IREM colleague from Minnesota, and over there, the medical cannabis is legal. So basically, he has a client that owns a building and lives in Texas. So when Dennis deposits the rent payments and remit that rent payments received from the medical cannabis companies in Minnesota to his client in Texas, the question is, what interstate commerce laws did Dennis and the landlord just break? And no one is really sure. So IREM is asking our representative in Congress to recognize this inconsistency and to support the passage of the Banking Act to allow safe and legal financial services between states so that cannabis companies from a banking standpoint can operate legally, where it is legal to operate just like any other small business in the nation. Next slide, please. All right, and we just want to thank you, IREM, for this amazing opportunity. And it was absolutely an awesome experience to go to DC and to meet with other IREM members and to actually get to talk about important matter directly to our representatives. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for representing us, Anne. And I just want to say that's the first time we've sent somebody from San Antonio. So I was really excited that you were able to participate and represent us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And now Catherine Hay will introduce our speaker.
Hi. So we're going to talk to Scott today. Scott is an experienced property tax professional. He received his undergraduate degree from Texas Tech. He has over 30 years of experience and possesses an extensive knowledge of the real estate industry and tax law. Currently, he is a principal at Ryan, which is a valued IREM industry partner. So thank you, Ryan, for coming to talk with us today.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak to everybody. Some of you I've known for a long time, some of you I've known for a short time, and some of you I look forward to meeting in the near future. Today's subject is property taxes, which is always a subject that everybody wants to talk about in the afternoon, but it's tied in with the COVID and how this COVID-19 pandemic is affecting property taxes and their appeals. The one thing I'm reminded to do, I think we were going to do a survey. I'm not sure electronically how that's going to work, but I think they were supposed to send out a survey, and the question was centered around, oh, there it is. Have you appealed your building's property taxes for 2020? We're just going to take a poll. We won't take names, so you won't be called out at the end. I'm trying to, okay. But anyways, let me just kind of go into it. If we can go to, am I controlling it? Yeah, there we go. So the first thing I'm going to center around, and I'll center globally about the COVID effects and the biggest challenge of the timing of the pandemic, and the recommendations to address it. It centers around the assessment date, and this is really across the country, but it's also in Texas. The assessment date for property tax purposes, and as everybody knows, property taxes are your largest expense line item on your P&Ls. The assessment date is January 1st. So in theory and by statute, the assessor, the appraisal districts are charged with valuing the property each year on January 1st. Go ahead and run to the next slide if you would. So the question, as you or the professional you hired represents you in arguing your property tax valuation, which is something I recommend doing every year. When you're doing that, the challenge this year is to get consideration for the effects that are being felt right now for the taxes for the entire tax year of 2020, when the government is going to try and look at a picture in time of January 1st. January 1st is a spot date, but really as an appraiser, you're supposed to look at everything backwards and everything forward. Given that the pandemic, it was a moving target, but generally speaking happened in the mid-March timeframe. The government's position has been and remains, and probably will remain, that the picture in time as of January 1st, everything was rosy. It was the best economic times, being experienced. And hey, don't talk to me about this COVID thing. We'll talk about that next year because, we'll have more data. And certainly we will have more data, only that as an appraiser, you're supposed to look at things backwards and forwards to the best, as the information is available. And given the fact that we now have knowledge that this is happening, it's a challenge. It's the challenge of the person managing that appeal to get consideration for it. The taxing authorities, the reason for their position is, as you guys know, cities and counties rely heavily on sales tax, hotel occupancy tax, and property tax. Property tax is generally 50 to 60% of those revenues. The other two make up the balance. Sales taxes while there was a lot of sales, the sales taxes in general are going to be down. The hotel and occupancy taxes are going to be, abysmal with basically, especially a city like San Antonio that relies on conventions center and the hotel occupancy tax to a very large degree, proportionately compared to other cities. They're going to be trying to hang on to the last one that they think they have a chance to hang on to, and that's the property tax. So the lien date, again, as of 2020, 1/1/2020, the one of the arguments is that it's called COVID-19, and 19 obviously is in recognition of the year that it happened. So the risk existed, but was it being felt? Was the knowledge there? Would have been consideration? It's really, there's always economic risks involved that an investor makes, or that a property owner makes when he makes decisions to either buy a property or reinvest in a property with capital improvements. There's always that factor there. I can't say that I've ever heard of a client or an investor say, I've got to tack on 100 basis points for this pandemic possibility. It was always there, never really experienced, so never really, included in the equation. Well, it's safe to say that in the future, it is going to be included in the future, in the equation, and affect the prices and the whole trickle-down effect of the prices given and the capitalization rates used to get to those prices. So, so typically, if an economic downturn, let's just refer back to the 2008 economic downturn, happened in October. Well, when you're looking at January 1 of 2009, you had complete knowledge of that. So it was easier to segue into an argument of that. Go ahead. Yeah, thank you. And, there's again, not a contradiction for the consideration of COVID as it pertains to the January 1 date. I kind of touched on this. It's customary for property tax professionals and property owners when they're appealing their properties, looking at the historical financials, because it's the best. It's of January 1. That's the best information available. It doesn't always reflect the future, but it's the best you had at that date. So the challenge is to get the appraisal districts to consider more forward information. One of the things that you might consider as you go through the process in doing it yourself, or whomever you have representing you, is feed them that information and make sure you're giving them year-to-date information. And a lot of that information, that's what we're getting from our clients. We've gotten, April information, and in some instances through May information. But the further we get down, the more telling the data is going to be. So as your appeal goes through the summer, depending on the timing of it, it may be about completed, or it might be completed in 2 months. That information is important to feed it to the person who can take that information and talk about it in the fashion that this is not something I'm talking about in thin air. This is really being experienced. Our occupancy is dive, our asking rates are off. Our collections are way off. As you go through and potentially give abatements to tenants, say some of the things I've seen is you give them 3 or 4 months of no rent to be collected in 2021. Well, you're not going to be collecting that up front, so that's a financial hit to the property up front. But you want to be sure when you do collect it next year, and you're basically double collecting rent, hopefully, you need to break that out to whomever is representing and presenting that information to the county, to be sure that it's not now looking like you're getting double rents. It's just important to from an accounting perspective, to break that out. So I mean, let's go to the next slide, because that basically covers the fact that the COVID argument is relevant to 2020. The evidence of that, I mean, you can look at things in the last quarter of 2019, interest rate fluctuations, bond market, the GDP was static, and corporate profits didn't necessarily dive, but they had kind of reached a top, an apex, if you will. And the virus, again, the virus was known. There was just so many uncertainties of what its effect were going to be, and how if it was going to get here, when it was going to get here, and what the effects were going to be. Yeah, that's more economic stuff. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So the evidence to include as you're going through the process of feeding information to the assessor and getting them to recognize the effects of this is, the economic obsolescence that's inherently there. But again, this particular one was not recognized, but it's stuck its head up and is glaring at us today, that the economic obsolescence of something like this happening and its effect on the valuation of the property. And there's in this, you guys are going to get a copy of this presentation, and there's links that you can dig even further into the details if one so chooses. In December, the new virus obviously was discovered in China, and was it here in December? There's actually evidence that it was here. It probably wasn't known that it was here, but there were people sick and getting better, but they actually were having it back then. So it's pretty easy to get somebody to understand, and it's not like this is something that not everybody's affected by. When you're presenting to these boards and to these counties, everybody's affected by this. So it's a dynamic shift in the way everybody does business. So it's not a big surprise, and you're not some crazy guy talking about something that's not being experienced. Go ahead and go to the next slide. There's some articles that are on one of the hyperlinks. Oh, that's not the. Did I skip a slide? No, you're good. Stay with that one. There's actually, to go into a little bit of technical word, the Appraisal Institute actually allows an appraiser to not just use backward information, but if the knowledge is known, to use forward-looking information. So, the assumptions of yesterday, the cap rates of yesterday are not necessarily valid today. New data, current data has to be used, and the Appraisal Institute, who's the monitor of things of that nature, gives an appraiser the ability to do that. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Yeah, go ahead and actually go to the next slide. This is a little bit more relevant. So some of the things that can be used once you compile the data, one of the things that the counties don't like to use, because it has a lot of variables, is a discounted cash flow. And a discounted cash flow gives one the ability to look at a property and make assumptions on usually an unstable property, a property that is in some state for some reason, going through some questionable stability. Obviously, this event has created that to some extent for every property. Nobody really knows what the extent is, and nobody will know until we get through it. But the risk rate, again, the capitalization rates used, the components that they include are gonna certainly reflect a different or an increased consideration for this type of risk. The obsolescence analysis, the easiest example of that is hotel rooms. Hotel rooms in San Antonio, Texas, convention center. What if we don't have conventions again, or for 3 years or 5 years? It's questionable whether 50%, give or take, of the hotel rooms in San Antonio are even necessary to the market without that particular demand. So you have complete obsolescence. You have a hotel that's a beautiful hotel, but it's obsolete. What is its value? And to a smaller degree, you can take that analysis to a retail shopping center, an office building. People have learned how to work remotely. When everybody comes back, how many of them are coming back? How much space do we need? Does everybody need a desk, or every third person need a desk and we're going to share because everybody's going to be doing what we're doing today on Zoom? Those are questions, but that's a function of obsolescence. And the discounted cash flow is a tool that gives you the ability to support the obsolescent factors. And the cost approach, well, it's a little bit more rigid. You can use some functional and economic obsolescence to do the same thing. And there's different places to get that information. Duff and Phelps is a possibility. And you can look at treasury yields, which is just a function of the cap rate. So next slide, please. So this just kind of gives you the tools that to take all that economic data. I kind of went into detail already with the DCF. The direct capitalization perspective is more of a stabilized property that has what is considered a market occupancy at market rates. If you don't have that, that's when you want to really go to the discounted cash flow. The sales comparison approach, the historical sales are going to take into effect the old economic climate. So how do you discount those until such a time in the future that you have sales that reflect the new economic climate? So those are things to consider. In the cost approach, again, you can use obsolescence, external and functional obsolescence to adjust it as a factor. So that's really the technicalities of it. And that's kind of on a national basis. But in Texas, the real difference is that I have seen and that we are experiencing in representing, some of y'all and other people in property tax appeals across the state. The doors are closed. It's a public building and the doors are locked. That's never happened before. If you want information, today you can get most of it on the internet, but you can't go to a customer window or go to a customer desk and ask somebody. You just flat out can't even get in the building. And so that presents a challenge in how do you communicate information to these people who, in most instances, are technologically challenged. Governmental entities are typically 3, 5, 8 years behind the private sector. So if you think the private sector wasn't ready for this, you should see how the bureaucracies are trying to react. And some of them have done better than others. But instead of going down and physically sitting down and talking to an appraiser about a property, you're now emailing back and forth. You're losing that personal touch of discussing it. It's all sanitized in an email that says, the points that you're trying to make that may or may not come across as well or not. The next challenge is if you have to go to, or if you need to go to a formal hearing, the statutes call for call for an in-person hearing. And actually, the Attorney General has written an opinion that says that an in-person hearing is guaranteed by the statutes. That's a challenge, especially in the smaller counties where they're just completely ignoring that. They really don't care if you want to come in, they're not letting you in. So the options are to send a notarized affidavit with your evidence and get it considered in your absence, or do a Zoom meeting similar to this, which, you know, arguably doesn't have the same effect or the same consequence, thus taking it to a situation where it's more onerous on the taxpayer and having to file a lawsuit concerning something that possibly could have been taken care of otherwise much more cheaply, faster, without this situation. Those are the biggest effects. You know, obviously this is kind of the window year where 2020 is, you're talking about the valuation for this tax year, and the challenge is to get the appraisal districts to consider the points as it pertains to the COVID-19 effect. Next year should be a completely different activity, because by theory, I mean, the information will be in, it will be funneled in, and you'll be able to analyze it. And that's going to be a time that the counties actually are going to change the way they look at it, because they've historically done that. And one of the approaches, I haven't seen it yet, but I can guess that if you walk in there with your actual documentation from 2020's financial year, they'll say, oh, well, you know, but that was an aberration. Let's take a 3-year average. Well, you know, if the situation was different and you had a year where an average would have helped you, they weren't going to do that when you had a really good year. They wanted to value as of that day. So those are just some things that to consider. Again, I can't emphasize enough, to whether you're doing it yourself or you have a professional doing it, get him current information, because your current information is going to give him the tool or the information that he needs to, you know, potentially get as much consideration this year as possible in lessening your liability, because it's going to be a challenge as you get towards the end of the year, and you've got tenants that are struggling for multitudes of reasons associated with this, and you know, a higher property tax, or even a property tax at the level that it was in 2019, is going to be a challenge. So I'll open it up for questions. I don't know how electronically that would work. Natalie, you got any ideas?
Yes, so there's the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, or if you hover over the middle, so folks can submit that, and then Scott, I'll read it out to you when I see it. And I do have a couple questions for you.
You're vibrating. I can't really hear you. Can everybody else hear? Go ahead. Try it again.
So I have a couple questions for you, and then I'll read to you the questions that do come in to the Q&A box. But while people are thinking of their questions, so what specific, or what information do we as property managers need to be sending to our tax professionals?
Updated rent rolls. Updated rent rolls as of the latest you have. If that's April, if that's May, soon to be June, just your latest rent roll. Collection reports. Who's not paying? What's that as a percentage? Letters from tenants asking for abatements or telling you that they're just not paying, so that you can get an understanding of, as a function of your expected revenues, what you may not actually realize. And then if you have it, and sometimes this is a challenge because the data is moving, but if you have your budget to date and then your actual to date, and compare those two to see where you thought you would be on June 1 or June 30, and where you actually are, and see the delta there. And also compare that same period, compare that same 5 or 6 month period with the same months from the previous year. it's all an attempt to establish trends and understand what the effects are from an economic perspective. And again, some of this data is just rolling in, so it's going to be more easily identified in August and September likely than it is today, but we have what we have today.
Okay, am I still hard to hear?
What you say?
No, okay. Let's see. Would another member perhaps ask a question while I figure this out?
Look, 80% of the people, that's awesome. Everybody, appealing your property is like voting. You have to do it or you might lose it. But 20% of you, maybe there was a good reason not to appeal, but that's actually a very good statistic right there. Are you trying to switch audio, Natalie?
I am. Can you hear me?
It's still muffled, but is everybody else experiencing it, or is it just me?
You're still muffled, Natalie, but we'll take any other questions from the membership if they have. And I'm monitoring the Q&A box as well.
There's a couple of things down there in the chat. Oh, it's all about the vibrating. So if anybody, I mean, if you don't have any questions, if anybody, you can get a hold of me at scott.retzloff@ryan.com, or I'm in the IREM book as well. So feel free to contact me if you have any questions, but I appreciate the opportunity today. You're on mute now, Natalie.
Can you hear me?
Muffled, but we can hear you.
Okay. Angelica, if you're there, can you help out? Oh no, Angelica's not there. Well, thank you, Scott. I had more questions, but I know it's hard to hear me, so thank you for your time. And Catherine, if you can, could you assist me?
Natalie, do you want to chat over your questions and we can read them out for Scott if you want to just add it into the Q&A or the chat box? I'd be happy to read those out and ask Scott as we go.
So Catherine, if you can help with me finishing up the slide presentation.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, absolutely. I apologize. I moved locations to eat lunch. So we just wanted to thank everyone who purchased a meal or a drink from Charity Bar during our socially distanced social on June 12th. 10% of your profits went back to the IREM chapter. We're excited to hear what the results were. David Malley with Longhorn Lot Maintenance, of course, he is a partner in Charity Bar, so he was gracious enough to do that for us. We had a good turnout. Some people won some prizes, so we're really happy with how it went.
Good.
Next slide, which is going to be really awkward. Next slide. Okay, yeah, this is fun. So,
Thank you, Scott.
So for some really wonderful news, our very small IREM San Antonio chapter has produced 4 of the 30 under 30 recipients. We have Brooke Casper-Kahn, we have Elizabeth Rose, we have Roxanne Zinnerman, and myself. IREM's 30 Under 30 Award recognizes the next generation of real estate management leaders for their contributions to the profession through career success, professional leadership, and community involvement. There are chapters in 17 different countries. And so it is a global award, and it's very exciting if you think about that scale of how many people from San Antonio received it. And they're all women. So our next event, guys, is going to be the virtual, will be upcoming events is the virtual MPSA course. That's going to be July 13th through 14th. It will be it will be able to be done remotely. It's going to be really exciting. San Antonio is part of a very small group that's kind of trying this out. So we're really excited to see how it goes. I know for a lot of people that's going to wrap up their CPM. And then after that, we're going to have our August virtual luncheon. That's going to be on August 13th. Mark your calendars. And we're actually going to take a break from talking about COVID. So that'll be really fun. We're going to talk about how some of the green spaces in our town, Hemisphere Park, San Pedro Creek, and Confluence Park, how they affect the built environment. And we're going to talk about people that planned, designed, and executed those projects. If you want to stay up on any of these upcoming events, Roxanne, our social media chair, does a great job of posting those things on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Make sure you follow. It's a great way to stay on top of everything. And we want to thank and acknowledge our IREM industry partners, again, for your continued support of IREM and our members during this time. As a reminder, if anyone is in need of a qualified service vendor, you can always check our directory online for our industry partners on our website at sanantonio.org, and they're all here to help you, and they all will provide you great service. So thank you again for joining IREM San Antonio today, and this meeting is adjourned.